Thoko Didiza. If I were to say, maybe not if I were to say, when did you join the ANC and why?
Well, as you know, that the ANC was unbanned in 1990. Previously, there were organizations that were, I would say, linked to the ANC, even though that might have not been overt. I actually started very early as a student, where I was an activist. I studied at Oshange High School in Nanda, which was built by Mafuzela, the first president of the African National Congress. But I would say the idea for activism started very early, influenced by maybe the fact that my father taught in Swaziland, and so we spent some time in Eswatini. My mother comes from there. And at the time, Swaziland had already been a liberated protectorate, as you know, that it was one of the British protectorates. So equality was, even though maybe you can't say it as we would define it today, but there was already a semblance that, everybody is the same in terms of the institutions, in terms of the facility. And when we came back to South Africa, and I was a little bit now in my early grades at primary, the fact that in town I could not go to an ablution facility that is close by to where I am on the basis that it was only designated for a particular race group raised question to me as to what type of society are we living in. And there are many things that I started to observe. And my father used to listen to the news. So staying in a four-roomed house, very small. So all of us had to be quiet, basically. And you start then to follow and listen. And I think what struck the chord was what happened in 1976 when the Soweto uprising, happened and Hector Peterson was killed. And I think because of the age closeness, at the time in 1976, I was 11. And I imagined that it could have been me. And the question was, what type of a police force do we have as a country that could not have used other means to quell, whatever form of protest other than resorting to live ammunition? That something was really wrong, that a life of another race actually meant nothing. So for me, that stayed with me. And I just thought, can all of us just sit and do nothing? And I don't know why my father chose Osame as a school. I mean, I had applied, I was taken at Mazimtoti, I was taken at Lanezo. I had not even applied at Oshine, but my dad decided that that's the school I was going to go into. And my going there, I mean, the first impression as a child, you think, oh, that's look, yeah, it's a school, but within a week, I think the look still not better anymore. I think it was the depth of what the school was offering. Because in that first chapel, when we had to go for morning devotions, one of the things that the principal did was to give a little background about the school. Who built the school? Why? And then thereafter, all of us who were freshers had to remain and learn the school anthem. And at the end, the choir master, Mr. Kumal, would make us walk around that chapel, which had got the photos of Chief Albert Lutuli, Mafuguzela, Langabalele Dube, Charles Ndube, Ndima, Nsiklele, and others, part of the people who actually contributed towards the building of the school. And I must say that initially, because he didn't explain who these people were. So midweek, curiosity set in to say, what's important about these people? So we then started asking questions. Then went to the library. Then we started to appreciate who these people are and who they were and what they did and the organization they belong to. I think for me, it was, if you have people like this who, through their conviction, had decided not just to form a liberation movement, but also to do something about it by starting to change the environment by educating a Black child. I thought, well, some of us can do something too. If they have been able to do it, then why not? And I think that, because also the nature of the school and the teachers, some of whom had been students there, came back and taught, we were able to then have an appreciation of the need for actually carrying on the baton of what the forebears who started the school had done, and understanding that education was important, it was able to transform society, but that needed to be supported by activism.
Okay. If you were 11 in 76, what age were you when you joined and were sworn in Parliament?
I was 29 years old.
29.
Yes.
Which year was this?
That was 1994.
You were a member of Parliament in 1994.
Yes, I was.
Were there many 29-year-olds in the caucus?
Well, there could have been. Of course, I wouldn't have known exactly the ages of everybody, but there was a sizable group.
You're still a member of the youth league. Were you in the youth league?
No, interestingly, I was actually working in the women's movement. I was a member of the Natal Organization of Women, and I was its co-treasurer with Mayor Ella Gandhi. At the time, Nozizwe Madlala Rutledge was actually the chairperson of the Natal Organization of Women. And I think it is through those women from whom I also learned on how to organize, on how to bring your skills into building of an organization. And in 1992, the ANC Women's League actually convened that first conference of women across political lines, across religious lines, and across sectors to actually start what became known as the Women's National Coalition. And I was then asked to be its general secretary. And the organization I was working full-time for, which was the South African Council of Young Women Christian Association, released me to actually go and do that work full-time. So if you look at the work I did in the women's movement, it was always intriguing. Why am I not in the youth movement? And it was a choice, not because I thought there was anything wrong, but my view was, who is going to articulate the issues of young women in the women's movement if some of us are not active? So it was a conscious decision that I decided to bring my youth activism in the women's movement. But I had always worked with youth structures, which is the reason why I would think the ANC Youth League, when it decided, to nominate young people who will go to parliament, they actually, together with the ANC Women's League, felt I was the right candidate. To a point that when that first list of the first members of parliament, I was not in the first 100. I was in the mid of the second 100.
Yeah.
But the Youth League actually negotiated and lobbied at conference that Pax Mankahlane, who was in what you call safe space, would come out and then become the spokesperson of President Mandela, and I will be brought in to that space. And I must say that that did two things to me, because I understood that I was not there only because of my activism, but it was an appreciation that my generation and the young people and women with whom I have worked felt there was something that I could contribute. And it made me conscious that I am, in a sense, their representation. So if I were to do something wrong, it was not about Thoko Didiza at the time has done something wrong. It would have been, you see what young people can do. You see what women can do. Because remember that our society, as much as they appreciated the role that young people played in our liberation struggle, the role that women played in our liberation struggle, but there was still that thing to say, can we really trust our lives to young people? Can we trust our lives to women? Even though not articulated as such, but the doubts were there. And therefore, it was important that one was conscious not to actually set back, the struggles of women and young people, but by what you do in the responsibility that you are given.
Now it makes sense. I mean, you knew how it felt for some of us in those benches, because your first time in parliament, you were relatively, in the same age. But we're a discussion for another day. Wealth of experience in parliament. 1994 cohort of members of parliament understood to have been amongst the hardest working, because they had to overturn a lot of legislation, a lot of apartheid legislation, as it were. This is Madiba team of people. Maybe your highlights in that first 5 years of parliament.
I must say that, for me, it was bridging both the experience of having been an activist prior to 1994 and having navigated a lot of spaces at that time, and coming from a province which was beset by violence at a particular period, changing its form, where, the then apartheid regime had to use proxies to pursue their interests and to increase repression. So one was conscious of what mobilizing and having to pursue, the struggle under those conditions. But also one lived in a period where you already had the reimagining of a possible South Africa. And I remember some of us during those times of the drafting of the Harare Declaration and the engagements between activists from home and those who were in exile. I remember in one of the meetings I was in, meeting with the women's section, and we were like, you guys, have you gone that far where you start to think about post-apartheid South Africa? And here we were, still have to face the bullet. But you started to think that you can't only be fixated that, with what we are experiencing now, but you need to start to imagine and start to prepare should you don't end up liberating the country through insurrection, but through negotiation. So it must find you prepared. So we had to start to do that work. So when the talks started after Mandela was released, it became clear that, this route becomes real. The first conference in 92 of the ANC Ready to Govern, it was indeed like a state of preparedness. But what 94 then brought is that we were a transition between the negotiations and the drafting of the final constitution. You'd recall that 1993, there was the adoption of the interim constitution, which then allowed for setting up of a transitional arrangement where there was co-governance of that time already before the elections. And there was an agreement, there had always been an agreement within the African National Congress in particular and other organizations that those that must draft the final constitution of the country must be the representative of the people. So that's why 1994 was very instructive in that it created that possibility of having a constituent assembly that would actually draft that constitution. So you had, I would say, a dual purpose in that first cohort of members of parliament. It was to finalize the constitution in a participatory manner to make sure that as many as is possible South African citizens would actually contribute towards the South Africa that they want. Yes, you have that base document, the Freedom Charter, that gave that architect, but you now had been some decades further from that document. So you needed to also appreciate the lived experience of those who are there to say what type of a South Africa they want. That's what we did from 1992, though it was more targeted to women, to say what type of South Africa do you want so that we can feed into the negotiations. So that 94 to 99 period included the finalization of the constitution, which was chaired by the current president, President Ramaphosa. And then after the adoption, you then had to continue in terms of lawmaking and whatever. But what was interesting is that some of these things happened concurrently, because on one hand, if there was law to be enacted, you couldn't say, well, we're still trying to finalize the constitution. For instance, one of the first legislation that was passed was the Restitution Act of Land Rights Act of South Africa. That was the first legislation post-apartheid that was actually drafted. So you couldn't say, let's wait on this issue of restitution, we are still busy here. On the other hand, government had to function. You couldn't say, well, we don't have a fully fleshed frame of government that we want. You had to make sure that as a successor in state, the country is functional. You participate in international fora where you must, but at the same time, the country must be governed. You are a government, no more in waiting, but a government after the election that has been elected to lead the country. So that was, and it required a maturity on all sides at a political level to appreciate that era, because it was a very important era, in my view, of setting up institutions that would create the South Africa that we wanted. It meant putting up laws. It meant putting up systems that will make a country to function. But at the same time, you had to appreciate that there's fragility. And that fragility, because loss of power is not an easy thing.
Yes.
So those who had been in power, I'm sure there were some who were still wishing there could be reversal that will make the status quo to remain. You had those who felt very disappointed that this democratization has actually, the reality of it is here. So you had to manage sensitivities that, you make every South African feel that you are a part. What we fought was a system. It was not fighting individuals, but it was a system that didn't only just oppress those who were oppressed, but it never liberated the oppressor too. So part of this new environment, it's about creating and co-creating a South Africa where all of us can live in.
So that makes you the quintessentially most experienced public representative, as you preside over Parliament now. But I wonder, in many ways, the Parliament of 1994 to manage in this diverse, the ANC was a majority. Of course, there were this strong caucus of former apartheid leaders with wealth of experience sitting there, and legislatures and all of that. But the Parliament now is also in many ways a fundamentally different Parliament, in that it's a Parliament without an outright winner, with an executive, which is a coalition, one of the greatest tests of our democracy. When you think about Madagascar, Tanzania, you think about Kenya, the ANC lost power. There was no single drop of blood. There was no protests. They just went and negotiated and begged the DA for votes.
I'm not sure whether we did that.
But it's a very tough Parliament. But let's go into it. The current challenges that you are facing presiding over Parliament. The House is burned down, the physical building. What's going to happen? Is that house going to be rebuilt in your term of office?
I hope so. Let me take you back, though, a bit as to the different epochs. We've spoken about what were the challenges in 94, what had to be managed so that there is no reversal.
Yes.
In 2024, what made it possible that you couldn't have a loss of blood, as you say? One of the things that the ANC, in my view, had done very well has been that strength of having to dialogue, not only among itself, but also with other players. You can trace the tradition from long, long before. And I think it has continued over time. But also post-1994, even though you had a legislated government of national unity, after 96, when the National Party, moved out of the government of national unity, you still had the IFP remaining. And that practice continued. In 1999 to 2004, you had the IFP, you had AZAPO, per invitation of the ANC. In 2004, the same happened. In 2009 rather, you had the Freedom Fund being part of the government. Mulder was the Minister of Deputy Minister in Agriculture. 2014, the same. So I'm just saying that I think helped, because the ANC had always understood that beyond itself, those who are members of an organization, there are many other South Africans who may not be within the ANC, but who are patriotic about this country, who have something to contribute to make sure that the country goes forward. And faced with the loss of election, the ANC had to reflect where it stood, whether or not it can go it alone in a minority government, which it could have done. But would that have actually brought stability? So they had to think about that. A grand coalition where you have one or two parties, was that going to put the country in good stead? Remember, the 18 parties that we have, what it shows is that many South Africans still want to participate in this democratic process, but they have a choice because the constituencies, their appeal is spread across these parties. So you couldn't ignore that, which is why the ANC felt, if this is what the electorate has done in their vote, the message is clear that would want all of you to sort this thing out. Our life is very important. Our country is very important. But we're giving you a message that there are various interests that we as citizens have. And for me, I think that invitation to say, if we all agree on these tenets, that this is where we need to take the country for, let's work together. I must say that you have had already signals at a local government level where different coalitions were formed, and I would say distinctly from 2016. I think the winds of change of having some core governance of sorts started at that time, where various metros could not govern alone, but could be coalitions, but even also at a municipal level, which I think a message already became clear that you would have different permutations, but how do you manage those such that you do not have a collapse? We had seen the worst of coalitions where there was instability and there was no movement on service delivery. We also saw some coalitions working. And I think that ability to put the country first, in my view, and also appreciating that at the end of the day, the citizens would want a functional country. It's what, in my view, has put us to where we are.
So the bent down parliament.
Let me say,
are you rebuilding it? Will you finish? Will you finish before 2029?
Let me say in that context, because in this period, in the 2 terms, I think that certain things that have shocked us, but I think our adaptation and response have been marvelous in my view. 2020, you wake up, you are told that already you have got COVID cases. And you have already seen how many people have died in other parts of the world. And you needed to act. But what that did, having acted, having closed off the country, having put whatever systems of treatment and testing, the truth was the country must run. So technology propelled us to say, it's not only meeting in boardrooms, you can actually meet virtually. Parliament itself needed to pass certain legislation to enable government to act. So we already started working on virtual platforms. We already started working on hybrid, and the sky never fell. We continued. So unfortunately, it's not something that we all would have wanted to have a bent parliament, but it had enabled us, that technology introduction into our work has enabled us to actually continue to function. One of the things that we all need is still to have an assembly, because it's not just a meeting room. It is actually a symbol of the representation of our people's democracy. So you do need a house. We do need to build it, which we are doing. So what has delayed has been the fact that that's a heritage site. So you can't do it like we are doing on virgin land, where you can just dig a foundation and contract in 100 days, you're done. Here you needed to also ensure that are there certain artifacts that can still be saved that represent our history, both the old and the post-apartheid history. So that took work, a lot of work, because even on the demolition, you couldn't just demolish anyhow. You had to have the heritage engineers who would look at what you are doing and how you are doing it. So now we are at the phase where we are actually rebuilding. But in terms of the work that was done in the 6th administration, was actually to agree on the concept of the new parliament as well as the designs. And in that conceptualization was how to infuse the old and the new, but also the history of the Khoi and the San, who were your first or early people in this region. So you had to put that, but also how does it become the representation of the whole of our country, because this is a national parliament.
Will this process finish before your term ends?
So where we are now, finish the demolition, we've started construction. And from our implementing agents, the DBSA, November, if everything goes equal, November 2026, that's when they're going to finish and then start commissioning. So everything goes well, 2027, the house will be up.
Will be up and running.
Yes. And remember that the old assembly will remain, as it were, with few refurbishments. It will remain, because it was not all completely burned down. The new assembly is the one that will be redone completely. So if you were to visit Parliament, and I invite you to come and visit the Speaker, and I will take you on a tour, you will see the amount of work that has already been done, which gives me confidence that next year, before the end of the year, it's possible to finish. Okay.
And
New
Speaker,
Parliament.
there is obviously the flip side of that. I'm told Public Works set up a dome, and the dome is now not in a good condition anymore.
Let me put it in context because maybe your listenership may not understand. Public Works put a dome at the request of Parliament because members in the sixth administration said, while we appreciate that our Parliament has banned, but we need to continue to function as a Parliament. The first was building a mock Parliament. But when it was evaluated, it could have been more costly to build that structure. And therefore, finally, we all said maybe a dome. And then we remembered that actually there was a dome that Public Works had bought for the funeral of Tata Nelson Mandela in 2013. So we approached Public Works. They agreed, but they did say that because that dome has not been used for a long time, and I think the way it was kept, it might not have been in good condition. One of the skins was already teared off, and they were going to fix it, which they did. So we started meeting in the door. But clearly, there were certain things that needed to be done. So they asked that Parliament go back on hybrid because for those, the acoustics and other things needed to be sorted out. And there was again a little tearing that just did not make it work. So they went back. And when they did the numbers of what they needed to be done, they didn't have that on budget.
Okay.
They came to present to both the WIPARI as well as the Joint Standing Committee on Financial Management. We then asked Treasury to actually give Parliament 15 million rands to be able to augment what Public Works has had in order for them to fix that dome so that we can go back and meet as a full Parliament.
I'll just traverse the few aspects of the work of Parliament and some tough and some easy questions, but they maybe take us into confidence. How far are the processes to set up an oversight portfolio committee on the presidency, which has since 1994 never happened, where budget vote 1 is monitored across the whole year rather, like any other portfolio committee with its annual performance plans and so on and so forth. Is Parliament concluding, or will we see a portfolio committee which exercises oversight on the presidency?
Well, let me say, firstly, the Rules Committee had agreed on setting up the Oversight Committee on the President. What they've been working on has been the modalities of what will it actually do. And let me say why that issue arises. It's because you do have portfolio committees that deal with the functions that are in the presidency. So the question was, okay, so what will this committee do? And agreement and consensus, I hope, from the report I've received, has been reached amongst parties to say, yes, there are issues, particularly of policy nature, of, broad international issues where the president or the deputy president will have to come and engage with that committee. So the Rules Committee is meeting tomorrow to then finalize those modalities. And next year you will see that committee in action.
Set up.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
the other issue was interpolations.
Okay.
Because other members were proposing that let's go back to have interpolation questions. Because, but what in the discussions of the subcommittee on rules, they finally agreed that, while interpolations may sound good, but its weakness is that for your smaller parties, they may actually never get an opportunity. So there's a hybrid between the existing question process to what is in between, where a proposer of the question will have two times. So after the minister answers a question, as it happens now, a supplementary question by the one who proposed. Then there'll be other 4 supplementary questions by other members. And then at the end, the main proposer will come back again.
I see.
So that tries to breach the interpolation as we know them and our current system, but to allow for that further engagement between the person who had raised the question to a minister.
Let's go to this function of oversight that is constitutionally bestowed on Parliament. The immediate controversy obviously surrounds General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. I know where to go, for instance, Speaker, to report an incompetent minister. I go to Parliament. I say Minister X is not doing 1, 2, 3, 4. The trouble with Parliament, when it does not execute its duties, where do we go? Because the instance of Mkhwanazi is that he comes to the Police Portfolio Committee, complains about a set of issues, and the center is a specific committee is being disbanded in the police, political killings task team, blah, 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 blah. There's this person called Brown Mkhwanazi who is close to the minister. The minister says, I don't know him, blah, 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 blah. End of discussion.
Well,
and then he's then forced to do what he did, wear camouflage with rifles and say, criminals, you must now we are done. There are criminals who are running the police, they are running very influential members of the cabinet and political parties, and we have tried all other means, nobody's listening. But where do I go from I'm saying that we forget the facts for now. If a portfolio committee had been seized with such information, it could be any other information, and Parliament doesn't do its work, where is the self-corrective measure, or how do you improve that situation?
Well, I'm happy that you are saying the other issues which you are making an example of, we can delve with it, because the matters are being handled, as you know, by the ad hoc committee that has been set up by the House, as well as the commission set up by the President. But what normally would happen is where a citizen or even a member of Parliament may not be happy about how a portfolio committee has dealt with the issues, they would actually escalate that to the Speaker, who will then have to look into that matter, address it with the chairperson or even with the entire portfolio committee itself through the House chairperson on committees, or if such a matter would require further investigation or even a resolution of the House.
So General Mkhwanazi had the option of writing directly to you when he was not getting joy in the Police Portfolio Committee.
I would actually...
I'm saying in the future, how do we correct? Because he goes where he thinks, I've gone to Parliament and these chaps will do something about this information. 3 months later, nothing has happened. Maybe he was about to be arrested, or maybe in worse circumstances, such a person could actually be killed. You are saying that in the current setup, the next port of call for him was to write directly to you. You might have done something?
You may say I'm evading the issue, and indeed I am, because you are very specific about the matter that is being debated. Let me just say to you, one of the issues I was dealing with on my desk has been a member of the public who have written, has not even gone to the portfolio committee, has written to the Speaker and say, Speaker, I want my right to use money, hard currency. This thing where we are now told by some of the retail companies that I can't transact on money, I think it's infringing on my right. No member of parliament has raised that issue. That issue is being raised by a member of the public. I can say to that member of the public, I'm sorry, address that with the retailer. But I have an obligation to say, let us talk to the Portfolio Committee on Finance, bring this issue to their attention, because obviously none of us might have think that that issue is not sitting well with everybody in society. And he's advancing his reasons why he think we shouldn't force individuals to actually transact only online. Cites the issues of cybersecurity, that's there. Cites, issues of inconvenience, that even if you're going to a, grocery store in the corner shop in a garage, now you must use a card, wanting to buy bread. So he's got his arguments that, in my view, needs to be evaluated, reflected upon, engaged, and maybe he's not the only one. There may be others in society, which might then mean the legislature or even the executive must relook at whether don't we need a regulatory system that's going to address his concerns. So most of the people, they do not know sometimes where to go, even to the portfolio committees. Other people cry alone where they are. And that's why the constituency offices of members of parliament become an important extension of parliament, where citizens can go to raise whatever concerns that may be having, where a member of parliament or a member of the provincial legislature can take those issues to the relevant bodies, because to citizens, government is not municipality, or their responsibility is to say, this matter requires Home Affairs. Here is the closest office of Home Affairs in my office. So also, simultaneously, the member must be able to write to the relevant official of Home Affairs to say, a particular member doesn't have an identity document, either it went away with floods or other circumstances is now inhibiting the member's child to go to school. So that is an extension of our roles as public representatives, not only when we're in the House, but even in society.
Okay. But Speaker, I'm not sure if we reached the destination. I mean, in a way, a hypothetical Mkhwanazi is not an ordinary. This is a police general. There are so many officials. Look at the official Babita in Gauteng. She might have chosen the same route. There's so many of these people, because society in its own way is fighting against corruption, is fighting against incompetence and all of that. I'm saying there's a systems failure here. Somebody that senior arrived at the parliament and something should have given in, it didn't.
Actually, part of the mandate of the ad hoc committee is to address exactly that.
But it's the same people.
No, it's the same people, but it may not necessarily be the same people in that committee. One or two maybe, they may be there. But an ad hoc committee, its advantage is that it brings in a different skill set in that parliament.
So part of the questions they will have to answer is, how do we improve the anomaly that occurred? But there is an acknowledgement that Parliament erred.
Actually, the question, I won't even say erred, because at the moment the process is not done. But part of the process is to say, what is the weakness in our system
Okay.
that a matter such as this, while having been tabled in our portfolio committees, was never dealt with the urgency that it deserved? What is it in our rules of parliament that we could have missed a matter such as this not to be able to be dealt with? Simultaneously, what is it in our legal framework that might be a weakness that is not enabling us to pick issues such as this even before we actually get a report on them? What are the early warning systems to say the thing is not working that might trigger a particular response from the parliament, either through questions to the executive or through the oversight, such that it's not only when a matter is tabled, because if a matter is not tabled, if a matter doesn't come through your normal briefings of the executive to the portfolio committee, but there are certain matters that have come across to our attention as public representatives, what is the best way of attending to them until there's a crisis?
All right, I'm looking forward to that. But final issue on this one, why has Parliament not done anything? We all appreciate and acknowledge it is the prerogative of the president to appoint and dismiss ministers. But isn't it scandalous, Speaker? The president has kept a person on full cabinet privileges when they're executing no duties. Full cabinet privileges on taxpayers' money. Why hasn't Parliament disrupted that scandal? I mean, how are you, Speaker, sitting here thinking there is a person driven around by blue lights with fully paid individuals, getting a salary of a cabinet member, and is sitting at home?
Well, remember, how does that sitting at home arise? That sitting at home arises not because there's a choice by an individual to sit at home, but it has come about because, wisely, the president has said there are serious allegations, and in order for the process that I'm putting in place, take leave. And it's done, not only in the political space, it's done in the private sector.
Speaker, this is cabinet.
No.
How can you be on suspension in cabinet?
Well, let me just say...
You can appoint him again tomorrow.
Let me say, one of the things is that what has happened is not like something that is an anomaly in society, in other sectors. You do give people, even in the administration, a leave of absence when you are investigating something, because there are allegations which may be proven right or wrongly, where you need to make sure that that person does not tamper with evidence or whatever. So the best way is to make sure that that person is not in the space. It happens in the corporate. Maybe the challenge is that it might not have happened in the public sector, in the political space, but not in the public sector, because in the public sector, in the administration, as I say, in the entities, that happens every day. But it's just that in the public representative sphere, it's something maybe that has never happened. Again, in the executive, because in the parliament, parties, they may not tell you as a speaker why a particular member is not there. They'll just put a leave. So you think it's a leave, but they are dealing with party issues where they feel that this member may be sit at home for a while. But in order...
Yeah, they did that to me.
Exactly. And I didn't cut your salary.
No, but I mean, you see, that's my point.
So what I'm saying is that maybe what you are triggering it's something that we might have to think about.
Yes, because the following question,
But at the moment, there is no framework that we rely on. There is no precedent also that we rely on where something like this has happened. And therefore, maybe we had never thought about it.
But okay, let's leave cabinet. Mr. Mkhunu is under investigation for whatever. He is still a member of parliament. Does he attend at least parliamentary responsibilities? Is he suspended as a member of the cabinet? Where is parliament in the play? Because in parliament he's a full member.
Yeah.
And parliament has not said anything about where it stands with his membership.
He's still a member.
So then the questions follow, isn't it, Speaker? He's a member. If he pitches in a committee, you can't say he must leave.
No.
And then secondly, even the president, had he dismissed him, would have had to come back to the bench. And my question is, from the systems of parliament, how is something like that able to occur?
There is indeed, as I said earlier to you, that we don't have a precedence of that nature. Because remember, parliament is a party system also. So it is the parties that gives us members. And I'll take you back to what happened with the MK party, for instance, when in the beginning there was the resignation and not resignation and so on and so on. Parliament wouldn't have made a decision to say to the MK party, you are not going to move these people. Because when people go to the elections, they vote for the party who has got a list of the members that they want to take to parliament. So it is the parties who will give us the list of their members. And it is the parties who will be able to say, I'm withdrawing member X from my party because either the person has resigned or we've actually removed this person for nefarious reasons in terms of what he or she might have done. So in this instance, the party has not said to us, we are withdrawing this member as a member of parliament. So he still continues to be a member of parliament.
And enjoy the...
When he's supposed to attend the parliamentary meetings, he does as a member.
Very, very difficult. I'll move to a different avenue of this parliamentary oversight. And it will be my possible last question. Capacity of members of parliament to execute their duties. Isn't it also the weakness of the party system? Maybe the weakness of representative politics altogether. But when you gauge the House in terms of all types of duties, and you know it is a lot of scholastic work that goes on in parliament. People have to read, understand huge reports, develop questions, poke holes to be able to make the executive competent, make entities. They come in front of engineers who come explain things to them, doctors or whatever, professionals. When you gauge the House and you say, maybe let me be specific, in your house now, what is the average skill set? How many of your members have no matric? And do you then do something about that to try and assist them, not through their administrators, them directly, help them to develop their skills to hold the executive accountable? When you gauge your House now at the moment, what are the skills set?
Let me say to you, maybe without making a question, but just sharing with you what my last-born daughter said. She said to me, Ma, politics is very funny. Out of a number of professions, we are the only one that don't go through any form of orientation or preparedness that is substantive. So I was saying, why do you say so? He said, lawyers, before they can be lawyers, they would have to do a year or two of articles beyond the textbook at university. Now having to deal with the real world of being a lawyer. So accountants go through the same. Nurses go through theory and practice at the same time.
Teachers as well.
Teachers, they even have development programs, because my mom was a teacher, so as a grandmother, she would see. He says, but you guys, I can actually,
Just have to do it.
he said, I can come out now, just finish my university and be elected to Parliament. I said, yes, but for me, what we had done, not now, because I think, again, it's important to go back to history. 1994, actually 1992 from an NEC perspective.
You were in the NEC
when we dealt with the Red
92 speaker.
Govern. No.
Oh, okay.
Post that conference, even while the ANC was in exile, even before, took people into training. You had the chief reps of the ANC who were actually doing ambassadorial tasks, even though they were not ambassadors of South Africa. We started to train people as part of the preparedness in the different fields. Some of them had a stint in Parliament, and then they were either deployed to the diplomatic service and so on. But we entered into a partnership with the European Union on learning and development program, where they supported us with the funding on preparing our parliamentarians. We used to work with VETS, and later other universities were added, where you would deal with issues of governance, lawmaking, and so on. So that program has continued to this day, where it's part of the capacity building of members in a more structured way. We do orientation, onboarding, I would call it, when members come. But what we've started doing, for instance, this year, through the Deputy Speaker, we actually have got training program in between the terms, where we would look at, like, for instance, the last training, we were actually looking at the rules that deal with the management of the House, and using some of the scripts, from the other terms, where people can actually understand why, when the Speaker says, leave the House, what is it that we have done? I mean, they took one of the clips where I was chairing as a House chair, and Matisha, responding to Honorable Pando at the time, so they play that clip so that members can understand in a practical sense the rule. So we've decided deliberately that we're going to do that, as a way of moving just beyond a broad orientation when people come, but also to say, apart from you understanding, your portfolio, but there are these generic things. For instance, we've agreed that next year we're going to have a program where we train members on diplomacy and diplomatic work. Because a person can say, no, but I'm not in the International Relations Committee. why should I be part of that? But you have been designated by Parliament to be in SADC. You have been designated to be in the AU. You have been designated to be in the IPUs. Those are multilateral fora which require diplomacy. So you can't just go there cold. You need to understand what does it take to be a multi-party parliament, but representing a country when you go to these multilateral fora. It doesn't reduce your party, but that's where you say, we're now standing as South Africa Inc. What are those issues that as a country we want to advance? So that's one element. But the other element is really to make sure that we encourage members to undertake training specific. We had done that in the past, even though it has dwindled for some time. We want to calibrate it because it enabled members. It doesn't help if I were to sit in the transport committee, for instance. I've never done any transport logistics studies. I'm a social scientist by training. Yes, I can read and comprehend, but you would require assistance to really understand the entirety of the sector, because you deal with aviation, you deal with logistics, you deal with transport, commuters and so on. How do you enable me to understand, firstly, how does this thing work? So that even when I read the documents, there is an appreciation. But also, what are the tools that we give to parliamentarians as a way of enabling them? So one of the things we've done now from a finance point of view in terms of resourcing committees, we said we needed to be transparent about how much each committee a year gets, so that they can plan appropriately for the work of their committees. That supports the public education, that supports the public, where they have to go and get, views of people and so on. But if you say they must do that without knowing how much money, we've started with a low baseline, 3 million per committee, just for them to start to be more focused. But also just improving self-development for people to understand that, you do need to actually improve yourself academically in order to be able to interface with the world, with the work that you have to do with the citizens equally. So I would say, if you look at the House today, you do have a sizable number of people that, in my view, can do the work. But you need to also work with parties, because I think some of the difficulties with parties, it's how they change. Today, they put you in this committee. You serve there 6 months. When you start to have the appreciation of the sector and what you deal with, they now change you to another committee. That doesn't help to build the capacity.
I know, Speaker, you didn't want to, I will take my luck either way. There is a character called O'Sullivan, who, from what we've been observing, seems to have threatened weaknesses in the parliament process, during a parliament process. Some people are claiming also members of parliament. Is Parliament going to take exception of O'Sullivan's behavior?
Well, let me say what I saw that happened on the day was when a member who was a witness after break then presented to the committee, the text that he has received, which indeed I don't think we can, either as parliament or as citizens, accept that form of behavior from anybody. because, you know, if you have got an alternative view, the best thing you can do is to write to the chair of the ad hoc committee to say, my name has been mentioned by witness X, and I would like to actually be given an opportunity by the committee to clarify or give my side of the story. That's the proper way in which such could be done, not in the manner that we have seen. Obviously, we'll have to look at our own, you know, legal framework and see how best we actually ensure that the witnesses are protected, but also members of parliament are protected.
Okay. My final question, Speaker, is to do with your work in the ANC. I have it on good record that you are a member of the Renewal Commission, the commission set up for the renewal of the ANC by conference. The chairperson of this commission is Mr. Ramaphosa. Have you, as a commission charged with renewal, ever met?
Yeah, the commission has met.
How many times?
And I must say that, you know, when the two past conferences of the organization reflected on this matter, prior to 2022, I was tasked with the responsibility to actually work with a team of people where we could actually help the ANC to draft a roadmap towards 2032. What type of an ANC would we want? What do people say? What are the reflections of us? So we did that work as the Renewal Commission to say, this is what we see in society given the work that we've done. And this is where we think if the ANC were to do certain things by 2032, will be an organization that we would love to be. And conference, having received that report, deliberated on it, then tasked the 2022 NEC to set up a renewal commission. So that was done. And I must say that there's a lot of work that had been done by the various structures of the organization, amongst which the Veterans League, who also made particular proposals on how we as a organization go back to the basic, re-immerse ourselves in understanding, not just understanding for comprehension, but also with meaning. What are the values of the ANC that we would like to, firstly, our understanding of those values, but also live those values because in them, they enable us to become this member of the organization that we want. Understanding why we formed this vehicle called the ANC and what is its mission, past, present, and the future, which takes us back to understanding the mission of the ANC, what it was set up to do. And if we all agree that we're not yet there, we might have had a 94 moment of ensuring the end banning and everybody having a franchise, but have we actually reached our goal of having a non-racial, non-sexist society? What are those things that would still be required to do where the wealth must be shared amongst all who, you know, who live in South Africa? All of those things, which if you look at all of them as said by the Freedom Charter, as also reflected in the preamble of our Constitution, we will all agree that we are not yet there. But are we that body that still understand that mission and are able to execute it, appreciating, of course, the challenges of today, which may not be the same challenges that the people of 1955 might have experienced, or even the people of 1994 might have experienced. If you look at today, we've got a lot of young people who in 94 had never had access to education, but now have. So in terms of access to education, in terms of access to health, you can say, yes, maybe we've gone a long way, but has our education system prepared the young people who can be innovators and be co-creators of wealth and be co-creators of new industry? So what is it that is lacking? So if we are this body, what do we need as this ANC that is leading government at various levels need to have as the quality of cadres that can ensure that we drive that mission? But also, if we say ours was about liberating our people, what kind of faith that people must still trust in terms of, can they still do what they committed to do? Is their conduct commensurate to what they say? So part of that work of the Veterans League in terms of taking us back has been undergone, not just in the branches alone, but also even with the NEC. And the work on the foundation cause, because one of the things by the Political Education Committee, we realized that maybe in terms of the people that have been mobilized in the organization, we're not the same in terms of understanding this organization. So we all agreed that all of us must go to Kwafesti, if I were to call it that way, so that we can move from the same basis. So I would say those are the little steps that are part of that continuity, a part of that journey, rather, towards that renewal of the organization.
But has the commission met?
The commission, as I say, has met. I don't think it matters how many times it has met, because the work...
Will the commission be presenting a report to the NGC?
Surely they will.
Okay.
But as I say, that for me, committees, yes, but is the work continuing that translate from what those committees must do?
Okay.
And I think that's what, in my view, it's important.
I see. If members of the ANC say, look, we need this face that you are describing, this set of qualities, but this era we are entering requires a brand of integrity, and they request you to lead the ANC, would you say no, Speaker?
Well, I'm happy because you started...
I mean, to be the president.
I'm happy because you started by saying if the ANC would have, say, this era, because that's how the ANC has always done. The ANC has always looked at the current situation and say, given where we are, what we see, what we think ought to happen, what collective do we need? And they would then approach those comrades to say, we do think that you need to assist us to be where. And that process is not a process that it's one or two person deciding. obviously there will be a discussion and a debate as to what type of a face, not just a face, what type of a collective, because you don't lead alone.
Yeah.
You lead with people. What is the combination of those skill sets that are required today in our organization if we have to continue to attain the objectives?
Okay.
And I would say one would reflect if the organization puts that question. At the moment, I think all of us are concerned about winning the 2026 elections.
As we should.
We must.
Okay. Thank you so much, Speaker.
Thank you.
For your time. And hopefully we'll catch you in between the end of the elections, the opening of the rebuilt parliament, and then on your way to the 2027 conference and hear if this question will have anything concrete. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mkhwanazi.
Thank you, guys.